I want to ask you a question. What happens when Jesus meets the Easter Bunny? Happy Easter, everyone. Or should I call it Astare, or Ishtar, or Ashira? Today, I want to talk to you on the subject, why Jesus and the Easter Bunny matter. Now, let's have a moment of honesty and clarity here. Easter precedes the resurrection of Jesus. Easter is an ancient celebration whereby people will invoke prayers, venerate, or honor the goddess who is also known as the Queen of Heaven, the divine feminine principle, creation itself, Mother Nature. She was also called Ishtar. She was called Astare. She was called Ashira. As a matter of fact, there's a good book written by William Devers that asks the question, did God have a wife? Archaeological evidence has been discovered that in the ancient and earliest part of the Israelite religion, the God Yahweh had a consort or a wife, a companion, who was known as Ashira. So goddess worship is a part of and has been connected to the earliest forms of ancient Israelite religion. But it all stems from the goddess of ancient Egypt who was known as Hathor and Nut. Easter did not begin with the resurrection of Jesus. And if we follow this idea that goddess worship prevailed and was practiced throughout the Near Eastern world and all around the globe, and if we call them who practice this type of nature religion, if we call them pagans, then what that means is, by the fact that we are celebrating Easter today, we all are pagans. Christianity has pagan roots. Let's be honest and let's be clear about that. And the people that we label as pagans, sometimes they're called Wiccans, Astarians. Some people they practice something in Haiti called Voodoo, and other nature-centered religions. These people are our brothers and sisters. We all are family. Now, when we begin to look in the scriptures, we find that something very mysterious and curious is actually hidden in the scriptures. As I mentioned before, an Old Testament scholar by the name of William Devers wrote a book called Did God Have a Wife? And he and others along with him have demonstrated that when you look through the scriptures, you see that ancient Israel did not begin as a monotheistic religion. They began as something that was polytheistic, the worship of many gods. They had also what they would call henotheistic, one God that had a company of other gods. That is all in the Bible, and that what we know as monotheism developed as time moved on. We also begin to understand, if you turn with me to Jeremiah chapter 44, we can see the practice of the Queen of Heaven firmly practiced in the Old Testament. So I say this to you because I don't want you to assume that what I am telling you and teaching you today and have been is something that is anti-Bible or is anti-Judeo-Christianity. It is in the heart of the scripture. And people historically have struggled with conceiving of God. But I want to show you a passage of scripture in Jeremiah chapter 44 If you look at verses 15 through 23. In this passage, Jeremiah, the last pre-exilic prophet, is talking to his people, Judeans, and they tell him this. Then all the men, Jeremiah 44, verse 15, then all the men who knew that their wives had burned incense to other gods, this other god here is the queen of heaven, Asherah, Nut, Hathor, Easter. Then all the men who knew that their wives had burned incense to other gods, with all the women who stood by, a great multitude, and all the people who dwelt in the land of Egypt and Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, this is their response to Jeremiah. As for the word that you have spoken to us in the name of the Lord, we will not listen to you, but we will certainly do whatever has gone out. Let me read that again. But we will certainly do whatever has gone out of your own mouth, to burn incense to the queen of heaven, and to pour out drink offerings to her, as we have done. We and our fathers, as we have done. We and our fathers, our kings and our princes, in the cities of Judea and the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of food, were well off, and saw no trouble. But since we stopped burning incense to the queen of heaven, that is, respecting Mother Nature, and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. The women also said, and when we burned incense to the queen of heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, did we make cakes for her to worship her and to pour out drink offerings to her without our husband's permission? Then Jeremiah spoke to all the people, the men and the women and all the people who had given him that answer, saying, the incense that you have burned in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, you and your fathers, your kings and your princes, and the people of the land, did not the Lord remember them, and did it not come into his mind? So the Lord could no longer bear it because of the evil of your doings and because of the abominations which you committed. Therefore your land is a desolation, in astonishment, accursed and without inhabitants, as it is this day. Because you have burned incense and because you have sinned against the Lord and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord who walked in his law, to walk in his law, in his statutes or in his testimonies. Therefore this calamity has happened to you as of this day. As you can see in that passage, there is a history and there's a tradition of the people of Jerusalem in the earliest times to celebrate what we today call Easter, what we today call the first Sunday, or the first Sunday after the full moon in the spring equinox. And there was tension between those who practiced the ancient religion of Judaism and those who were merging into a type of monotheism, which Jeremiah was recognizing. And they were trying to make sense of this movement. You see, what we understand here is that the understanding of God and how we understand God and this world and our place in it has always been an evolving process. And the people were doing well. And when they began to follow a different path, all of a sudden, they did not have the prosperity and the success that they had previously had when they were honoring nature, when they were walking in line with the Queen of Heaven. The symbol that we attach to this celebration called Easter, the Easter bunny, the eggs, the Easter eggs, the painting of Easter eggs, speaks to something that is very profound that I think that we have lost in how we process our faith called Christianity. What these practices express is the essential idea, and that is God desires that we should live. Just think about it. The Easter bunny itself represents the unquenchable urge to procreate. We all heard how, you procreate like a rabbit. That's why the rabbit is such a symbol to this time of year. Children are a part of this time of year. Coloring eggs is a symbol of this time of year. Because what? Children represents innocence, and the colored eggs represents life force. So what is this all telling us? This is why Easter is in spring, because nature is coming alive. It is expressing itself. It is sharing its beauty, because we have gone through the dead of winter, and now nature is coming alive. It was like the birth of new life in our world. We celebrate Easter because it is in us to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. That's why you feel so much energy here today, because nature is alive, and you and I are nature. We celebrate Easter because it reconnects us to that life force energy which is God moving through everything in the planet. Every tree, every flower, every animal, everything that has breath, praise the Lord. And therefore, the earth is alive. That's why the woman sings the song in the Oklahoma. The hills are alive with what? The sound of music. It's a living planet. I want you to notice that Easter is celebrated the first Sunday after the full moon of the spring equinox. How many of you saw that I'm going to get that later tonight, but how many of you saw that blood red moon? Yeah, that blood red moon. That's why on Easter some of you wear white and some of you wear red. Because red is a symbol of the blood. The blood is a symbol of life, according to Leviticus 17, verse 11. In other words, winter is over, and spring and new life has come. Sometimes Easter is in March, have you noticed? And sometimes Easter is in April. Easter is an astrotheological holy day. Look around you. What do you see happen? Life. So why does the Easter bunny and the colored eggs and the goddess of heaven, the queen of heaven, why are they important to us? At a deeper level, at the subconscious level, nature, our inner goddess, is telling us that our psychological winter of discontent, there's something that is trying to come alive in all of you. We go through seasons of life, psychologically. And sometimes you go through a moment of depression, and you go through a moment of gloominess, and you go through a feeling of being down and downtrodden. Spring rises in you, the energy to love, the energy to live, the energy to connect with people, to feel good. We step out of our dark clothes, we step out of our caves of life, and we come out into the sunshine, and we speak a new word. We're happy today. Look at all the beautiful colors in here. You got the blues and the reds and the purples and the whites and the yellows and all that kind of stuff. Why do we do that? Because we're trying to wake up something that has been dead in us. That's why we do it. We get up. We go outside. We spring up. Boys turn their little attention to the girls. In the same way, girls turn their attention to the little boys. Because you know why? The sap is rising in the trees. And it rises in us. That's why it's so hard to stay in school, young people, and listen, because you want to be outside. Like I said, the hills are alive with the sound of music. We change our clothes from dark clothes to light colored clothes. What is it trying to tell us? What is nature trying to give us? It's trying to share with us, it's time to plant. Women, it's time to have your man to plant a seed in you. Because where there's no vision, the people perish. The key to our success are women to renew themselves. Stop dreaming and let your man plant his seed in you. That's a vision. And start nurturing new life. This is one of the reasons why this year at Grace Evangelical Baptist Church, we entitled this the Year of the Woman. Because I really believe that women are the key to success. And if this community and if this church and this world is going to bring forth new life, women, like the Queen of Heaven, Easter, have to spring forth and bring life to this world. Because everything that comes into this world comes through the mental womb and the physical womb of a woman. And men must learn how to plant mental seeds as well as how to respect and plant physical seeds in the heart and in the mind and the body of women. See, one of the reasons why we are so afraid to talk about procreation and why we're afraid to talk about productivity as a people and money is because we have lost our inner goddess. We have disconnected ourselves from the divine feminine. But you cannot have this world. You cannot have this planet. You cannot have life on this planet if the earth did not receive the seed of God in it. Nothing would live. It is the purpose of nature. It is the drive of nature to not let the fall and the winter be the found story. It is the purpose of nature to keep producing life. And that's why we have to keep living, and that's why we have to keep loving, and that's why we have to keep pursuing happiness. So, what does this have to do with Jesus and the resurrection? What happens when the Easter bunny meets Jesus? That's the question. Let's go a little bit further. Y'all all right? I need to make some comments about the history of the resurrection. It's interesting that nowhere in the Bible does the biblical authors or even Jesus tells the Christian church to celebrate, to do church programs in honor of his resurrection. It's amazing that for 400 years, almost 400 years after the alleged time of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, that none of the early church people tried to hang around the tomb, mark it, make a pilgrimage back to it, try to save as mementos and artifacts his baby rattle, his crib, pieces of his cross. You go to Israel today, and you got two or three places where they assume that is the tomb of Christ. They weren't concerned about that. Doesn't that strike you interesting? That there was no tour guides and no pilgrimage made back to the so-called Holy Land? That was not the concern of Peter. That was not the concern of Paul. That was not the concern of the other apostles, John. That was not their concern. It wasn't the concern of the early church fathers. It only became a concern in 325 AD when the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the imperial official religion of the Roman Empire. That's when it became a concern. He gave his mother a stipend to go back to Jerusalem and to find these historical markers. When she got back, her name was Helena. When she returned, weeds had grown up all over the place. Nobody knew what in the world she was talking about. And therefore, because she's the queen, or because she's the king's mother, and she came back with a boatload of money, they said, well, it's right here. And that became the religiousized, commercialized origin of what we call Easter. And then, to make sure that there would be distance, Constantine killed all the so-called pagans, the people I just talked to you about who had a connection to the earth goddess. He made sure they died. He made sure that he wiped them out, gave the church power of the sword to kill them, to exclude them, and then he instituted what we today call Easter. That's why when I talk about this, you have that look on your face, because you don't know your own church history. Why is this important? Why does this matter? It matters because the resurrection of Jesus was not ever meant to be looked at as a historical event to be commercialized, ceremonialized for the church. I'm going to say it again. The resurrection of Jesus was not ever meant to be a historical event, to be commercialized, to be ceremonialized as a part of the church program. It was not. That's why you don't see the Apostle Peter and the Apostle Paul going back to the historical event. The resurrection of Jesus was meant from the very beginning and even now to be a psychological, inner, transcendent, personalized experience that each and every one of us should know in our hearts, in our minds, in our bodies. It speaks to our potential to go beyond, to transcend beyond the human and begin to become divine. It comes down to embodying transcendence. It's about to overcome our own fear of death. It's about to overcome the illusion of our physical existence, that you are more than the stories that you've been told. There's something in you that is eternal. There is something in you that is primordial, that wants to come alive in you. When you and I are conceived, two bodies, actually in the third, are in the making. Your physical body and your astral body. Your physical body and your lunar body. And potentially your solar body. What is that all about? It is for that reason to stop your potential, to keep you from knowing who you really are and what your potential really is about. That Constantine and his church bishops turned a spiritual event that is supposed to be in you, turned it into a religious event, and had you looking solely at what Jesus did and not recognizing that the same power in Jesus is operating in you, and that you are supposed to awaken, and that you are supposed to rise, and that you are supposed to transcend, and that you are supposed to transform not just your mind, not just your spirit, but you have the power and the potential to transform your body into an immortal body of light. That is the potential that we sacrifice when we focus totally on history and what happened 2,000 years ago. You miss out on what you should be doing in 2014, in today, in resurrecting your own body, mind, and soul. We sing about Jesus. He arose, he got up, he lived, while in our own body, mind, and spirit, our own consciousness is buried, dead, stuck in worthless practices and works called church programs. And we don't know the knowledge of our true self. We put on Easter programs, and we put on passion plays, and yet we ourselves as a people are lost in passion. That is, we don't have passion. We are like a blank stare, a blank mind, a blank wall with no emotions, no life, no spirit. And we sit there and we go through Easter speeches and Easter messages like the one I'm giving. And we leave out of here just as dead as we were before we came. We're like flatline. Look at many of us. Look at our emotions. Look at our lack of joy and our lack of happiness and our resistance to love and to embrace and to touch. I told the Sunday school this morning, it is one thing to see a picture of a banana or an apple. It's another thing to taste it, to feel it, to digest it. Christianity is not a religion. It can be if you make it into that and you are die in your spirit. It is an experience that we're supposed to have. You have to touch life. You got to go out there and breathe oxygen, and you got to embrace the sun, and you got to eat and enjoy life with gladness and with celebration. You have to know how to touch your woman and how to touch your man, how to hold your children, how to let go of the deadness of your heart from hurt and pain and suffering, and allow yourself to transcend all of that. That's what it means to come out of an empty tomb. It has nothing to do with saying a dead, dry Easter speech. It is one thing, brothers and sisters, to read about the Apostle Paul and to read about Jesus on the cross and watch a movie about Jesus on the silver screen and to watch the Ten Commandments and to see Jesus of Nazareth raised in the grave. It's one thing to read about it, to watch it on TV, but it's a total different thing to experience it in your own life. To become the Jesus that dies on the cross, being betrayed by your friends and being ridiculed by public and being put on a cross for open display, meaning people in the community talk about you and call your names and put you down. That's when you are really experiencing the life of Christ. Yeah. Look with me in Phillipians chapter 3, verse 10 and 11. It's one thing to read about it, another thing to know it. To know what it's like to resurrect when everybody thought it was over for you. To be on your deathbed or to see your reputation destroyed and people say, she's finished, he's finished, they can't make it, it's all over. And then to walk out of that environment with a smile on your face. The willingness to love again. The willingness to live again. That is the resurrection. That is what Jesus calls us to. Philippians 3, verse 10 and 11 says this very profound statement, and the other verses along with it. That I may know him. Notice the word is know. That's gnosis. That is experience, not head knowledge. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being conformed to his death, if by any means I may attain to the resurrection from the dead. Paul is saying, I want to live. I want to go beyond my race, my roots, my religion. I want a spiritual relationship. And you can't have a spiritual relationship, brothers and sisters, just reading a book. Listen to other people's experience until you go through and experience what it means to be dead, forgotten. And then to find a power that you didn't know that you had within you to give you the strength and the desire, the impulse and the urge to evolve, to transcend, to expand. That's one of the reasons why when you come to church, you look at people, they don't have no joy, they don't have no praise, because they don't have a relationship with God that is discovered throughout the process of what you go through in the week. But let you go through something in your family, let you go through something in your body, let you go through something in your psyche, in your mind, in your experience, and then you discover a power in you that allows you to get out of bed, to get out of your tomb, in other words, to get out of bed and want to live, and want to be happy, and to want to have joy, even though the people around you are trying to nail you to a cross. But you won't let them steal your joy. You won't let them kill your real life. You won't let them destroy your passion to want to love again. That is Easter. The other writer says, therefore he says, awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. I submit to you that the awakening of the consciousness, the awakening of the light to love, to live, to learn, is the resurrection. And Peter says, I'm not going to read this one, but Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 18 to 21, is that the prophets of old were moved by the Spirit. They were moved by the Spirit. And I want you to know today, many of us today need a prophecy. We need to be moved by the Spirit. We need to be moved by that internal unction that causes us to praise, that causes us to have joy and peace in our soul. That requires a move of the Spirit. This past week, I had a chance to go and to see 2 movies. I saw the movie Heaven is for Real, and I saw the movie Transcendence. Each one of those movies spoke from a different perspective about the same human struggle. Heaven for Real takes place in a Midwestern Nebraska city in Nebraska, primarily white Christian evangelicals. But the minister's son had an almost near-death experience. And when the boy awakened out of his coma, he told his father that he had went to heaven and that he had seen angels and he had seen a figure that he had identified with as Jesus. And it showed him his father's father or grandfather. He had these experiences that when he shared his father, who was a minister, could not believe it until he told his father what his grandfather looked like as a young man. Until he told his mother about the child that she lost in stillbirth. And the little boy was only 4 years old. And they could not explain that. And here they were preaching the Bible, talking about God and his power. And when God showed his power, they couldn't accept it because they were so addicted to the religion that when spirituality happened, they didn't know how to accept it. Even the people in the church, when the preacher began to accept his son's vision, even the preacher, even the church was considering getting rid of the preacher. So don't tell me what religious folk will not do and what they really believe, because I know the truth. Because when people begin to have an experience with the Holy One, when they begin to have an experience with angels, and when they begin to have an experience that goes beyond their little sanctified and their little religious size, religion and beliefs, they are no different than unbelievers. See, that's why I know church folk really don't believe in God. They really don't believe what they read in the Bible because they have not had an experience. The other movie, Transcendence. The other movie, Transcendence, was a great movie. It's spoken from a scientific perspective. And here, this particular computer whiz was able to implant his consciousness into a computer. And with that, he began to merge into a greater analog of himself. And even the community of scientists said it could not be done, and it was done. And when it was done, they became afraid of him because he began to expand his awareness, even though they had buried or cremated his body. That life, both of them talked about, both movies talked about life goes beyond the body. One from a religious perspective, the other from a scientific perspective. Go see the movies because they tap into the fear that every last one of us has, even though we talk about Jesus rose from the dead, and that is we are afraid to die. We are afraid to die. I asked you in the beginning, what does Jesus and the Easter Bunny have in common? Transcendence. Transcendence. That you are more than a physical body that lives, experiences life, and dies. That you are an immortal being. That you are an immortal being, imbued with the urge to live, to love, and to pursue happiness. That you are more than the story you've been told. You have the potential to be more than human, but to tap into your divinity, the inner Christ, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And that no matter what you go through in life, psychologically, emotionally, physically, no matter how bad it may be, you can overcome it. You can transcend it. You can awaken the power of God in you to transcend. If there's anything that I want you to get out of this message, is that God has shared with us through nature, that we symbolize as the Easter bunny and Easter egg, and God has symbolized through the teachings of his son, Jesus. You can love, you can live, you can be happy. If you choose to be spiritual and not be religious. It has always been our choice to choose how we want to be. You can die in hate, and you can die in fear. But you can also choose to love, to live, to transcend to a higher level. I hope today that you make that choice. Not just celebrate a past Easter, but become a resurrection to new life. Heaven is for real. And transcendence is possible. Happy Easter.